Y'all, last week Bella wanted to sit in my lap while I did this, and now we have Blue. So, what is up, our YouTube family? Welcome back to our channel. If this is your first time here, then it's just welcome to our channel and now welcome back. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed. You guys, I love you so much. I know some of y'all know what's going on here, but if you don't, I'm about to show you 3 stories that may or may not be true stories. The theme this week is first date horror stories. Watch them all, guess which ones are true and which ones are not. And at the very end, of course, I will be revealing the answers. We will be revealing the answers. Isn't that right, Papa? Without further ado, let's get into story number 1. I had not planned on downloading a dating app that night, but my best friend Stacy had been pushing me for months to get back into the dating scene. You're 23, Kimberly, you're gorgeous, you're a history teacher, and it's been a whole year since your ex. She made it sound so simple, but the stories that I recently heard about modern dating had kept me far away. Swiping through profiles felt impersonal, transactional, everything I hated. I genuinely loathed the idea. But then, after a couple of glasses of wine, Stacey's enthusiasm finally wore me down. Just make a profile, she urged. If you hate it, we can delete it. What's the harm? And before I knew it, we were taking fresh photos, it was fun, and we were carefully crafting my bio. She had suggested Hinge because, according to the ads, it was designed to be deleted, and the irony was not lost on me. And I figured if anybody knew, she would know which app was the best because Stacey's on multiple dates every weekend. It's kind of crazy how she was encouraging me to do what was clearly not working for her, unless our goal is to simply explore a bunch of places on someone else's dime. Her ventures have had a positive impact on our friend group though, because Stacy knows all of the good spots around town. And regardless of any of the things, she is having fun, and I guess that's all that matters, right? Later on that night, while laying in bed, unable to sleep, I decided to browse the app some more, and the app itself seemed pretty straightforward. Once I started browsing, I felt more comfortable, optimistic, and even excited. There was something oddly thrilling about scrolling through the profiles. Then after about an hour of browsing, I stumbled upon him, Chris. He was 26, an attorney with his own firm, tall, confident smile, sharp features. There was something else about him that I could not quite place. Before I could second guess myself, I hit like, and almost instantly we matched, and my heart fluttered. He had already seen and liked me. I text Stacey the update, and she was so eager, insisting that I go ahead and message him first. But I didn't even have to because Chris reached out immediately. And after a few messages back and forth, we exchanged numbers to take our flirting offline. Our conversations were effortless, playful. He was quick-witted, charming, and attentive. And over the next 2 weeks, we talked almost every day, whether it was a text or phone conversation, sometimes both. And as much as I hated to admit it, I started to think that, maybe Stacey was right. When Chris suggested meeting in person, I did not hesitate. And Stacey, being the nosy and often overprotective friend she does a little digging into his background and finds his LinkedIn profile. She wanted to see this lawyer for herself, but at this point I decided to go ahead and set a boundary because I wanted to get to know him organically on my own, and I didn't want her too invested. However, I did take a peek at the profile briefly when she sent me the link. Our first date was set for 2 days before Christmas, and I was really excited about that because evening dates during the Christmas season always feel much more romantic. There's an undeniable charm in walking hand in hand in the darkness through streets adorned with soft lights, garlands, ornaments. Even the simplest of dates are upgraded to something magical. And somehow, even in the crisp winter air, all of the shared moments feel so warm. He planned the date himself, which was also impressive, and the bar he chose was cozy, dimly lit with warm lights, and had a live band performing soft holiday jazz. After about an hour or so, I took a restroom break and I texted Stacey, giving her an update, letting her know that things were going well. Chris was even more charismatic in person. His laugh was warm, his gaze was very intense. The hours flew by as we conversed over drinks, getting lost in our little bubble. And when the bar closed, neither one of us were ready for the day to end. So for a while, we wandered through the chilled streets, the city glowing all around us, romantic, and somehow end up deciding to share a taxi to a nearby hotel. It wasn't planned, but it just felt like the natural flow of things. Chris had obviously had a little bit too much to drink. He was a little bit tipsy, staggering, and going down the hallway in the hotel, I actually had to help him a few times to keep him from falling. We get settled in, and Chris calls down to the front desk to request a late checkout, and then he put the do not disturb sign on the door. And I look forward to our night together, completely oblivious to what horrors he actually had planned. Almost immediately, it appeared as if he had sobered up, which I point out to him by saying, "You're not as drunk as you seem," in a half joke joking tone. He slowly curved his lips up into a grin and said, "You're quick." And at that moment, I caught something in his expression that felt dark. Despite his smile, and his voice was different. It was lower and a lot colder. And he didn't say anything after that, but he kept his smile. And again, there was that intense gaze. But this time, instead of giving me butterflies, it made my stomach tighten. To break the awkward moment, I asked if everything is okay. Not really sure what else to say. And in that moment, the mask dropped. He wasn't nearly as intoxicated as he had let on. He stood towering over me, and in a voice devoid of the warmth that I had come to trust, he said, "You'll find out soon enough." Panic surged through me, but the alcohol I consumed throughout the evening dulled my reflexes. I did try to back away from him, and I also tried to run, but he was a lot faster and his moves were very methodical, as if he had anticipated all of my movements and had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. When I go to grab my phone, I realized that it was no longer where I had set it, and I also realized that he had unplugged and hidden the hotel room phone after calling downstairs. At that point, my only option left was to try to fight him. But at that point, it was useless because Chris had been in control of this night from the very beginning. The following morning, the hotel staff found the room in a complete disarray. All of the bedding and the towels were missing. The lock on the window was broken. Chris was long gone, and so was I. Stacy worried after hours of unanswered texts and began calling my phone. When I failed to show up to house sit for a mutual friend of ours the following day, her worry quickly grew into panic. So she contacted the police to file a missing persons report, and she gave them all of the information that she had about Chris and my date with him. Meanwhile, Chris called his mother, and in an eerily calm and matter-of-fact tone, he confesses to her that he killed me and then apologizes to her for ruining her Christmas. Then he called a friend and told them everything as well, both encouraging him to go and turn himself into police. He, in fact, was not an attorney, and the LinkedIn profile was a fake. In reality, Chris was a former mental patient who had several run-ins with the law enforcement due to his violent nature, and his twisted fantasies had been documented by a psychiatrist who had warned that he was a danger to others. He once told a psychiatric nurse that his deepest desire was to murder a woman, strip her, and then perform necrophilia on her. And that night, he had finally gotten the opportunity to bring his horrific dream to life, ending mine and taking photos of me afterward to save his keepsakes. And afterward, he had inconspicuously wheeled my body out of the room using the hotel's laundry trolley, with me on it stowed away underneath all of the towels and blankets from the room. And then he just left me on the hotel property underneath bushes. Chris does take the advice of his mother and his friend and confesses all of the things to the police. And for what he did to me, he receives 26 years in prison. I swiped right on a whim and we matched. His profile was basic, just a guy who loves hiking, tacos, karaoke, and apparently terrible dad jokes. But something about his smile made me pause because it was both goofy and endearing. He wasn't conventionally attractive, but his smile was disarming in a way that felt safe. His name was Nate, and for 3 days we messaged nonstop, learning that we had quite a few things in common. Nate was also a student at my university, though I had never seen him around before, which was odd considering how much time I actually spent on campus. He admitted that he was shy and often kept to himself, which I also found endearing. And when he worked up the courage to finally ask me out for coffee, I could not say no. I was genuinely impressed that he had pushed past his nerves to ask. The day of the date, I walked into the cafe and I spotted him immediately. He was seated at a dimly lit table in the corner furthest from the entrance. And when I approached him, his smile faltered for just a second, then it stretched wide, a bit too wide. Something about his smile in that moment made the hairs on the back of my neck stand. Sitting across from him, I noticed that he did not look exactly like his photos. And I wouldn't say I felt catfish, but certainly led astray. He looked kind of like his photos in a way that a significantly lesser attractive sibling looks like their much sexier sibling, you know? And that might have been forgivable if there wasn't something else off about him. His energy was strange. It wasn't just the nervousness. He was nervous but very intense. something felt really off. My instincts were screaming at me to leave, but I decided to try and make the best of this time that we'd already agreed to share. I did my best to keep it cool. I smiled, nodded, and gave polite responses, but the more we talked, the more I knew I did not want to move forward with him. When the date ended, I thanked him, gave him a nice little smile, and I bolted out of the cafe. And as I walked home, I texted my roommate, well, that was something. And when I got home and gave her all the details, she replied with a single line, "Block him, sister." I laughed, but she did not. And instead of just blocking him, which I felt was rude, I decided to send Nate a polite text and let him know that I wasn't interested. I thought being straightforward but gentle was the right thing to do because we all deserve a little tenderness. And with us going to the same school, I didn't want any bad blood or any drama. I didn't want it to be awkward if we did happen to cross paths. It wouldn't cost me anything to be kind, or so I thought. Sometimes you swipe right and child, then you gotta sprint left. He responded quickly, seemingly taking it well, and I let out a sigh of relief, realizing that I had been holding my breath, staring at those 3 dots, dancing back and forth. Some people just don't take rejection well, and you never know how people will react to those kind of things. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next day I saw him on campus for the first time. And at first I convinced myself it was a coincidence. After all, we did attend the same university. But when I saw him again and again, I started to question whether or not it was a coincidence after all. He lingered in the halls near my classes, always at a distance, always pretending not to notice me. But it was very obvious that he wanted to be seen. I tried to tell myself that maybe I had just never noticed him before now. Kind of like when you get a new car and all of a sudden you see so many of them on the street. But then the messages started. At first they were harmless, just casual follow-ups like, "Hey, saw you earlier. How are you?" I responded once or twice out of politeness. But when I stopped replying, his tone shifted. The messages became sharper and slightly aggressive. At least that's the tone that I got from it. He would send me things like, "Are you ignoring me? Why are you ignoring me? Can we talk?" And then he began demanding that I meet up with him. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that and that he should just forget about me. And then I decided to go ahead and block him. But the next day, he wasn't just lingering outside of my class. He was standing right outside of the door, waiting. When I finally got the courage to walk out of the class, I did so very swiftly. But he called my name and he tried to follow, which turned into a very awkward scene of me having to yell at him and tell him to leave me alone. And I went to campus security, desperate for help, but because he hadn't actually threatened me or touched me, they said they couldn't do anything. That he was just standing there and technically he hadn't broken any rules by trying to talk to me. So then I decided to try and report him on the dating app, and their advice was just as frustrating and useless. They told me not to engage with him and to contact the police if I felt like I was in danger. Stalking and harassment just is not enough, I guess, which is crazy. After that, I was way too afraid to walk to or from class alone. Every shadow felt like him. Every text notification that came to my phone made my heart skip a beat, like maybe he had texted me from a different number. It got to the point where I started skipping lectures. I completely changed my routes. I altered all of my routines, but he always seemed to find me. And when I finally went to the police, they took my report, but without concrete evidence of a threat, there wasn't much that they would do either. It wasn't until I changed my number and deleted all of my social media accounts that the messages completely stopped. I switched up my classes, I started carrying pepper spray, and even considered transferring schools altogether to ensure my own safety, because apparently I was in that alone. Even still, I was afraid that with his determination and him obviously being a few cards short of a full deck, that he'd find out where I was. But after summer break, I never saw him again, and I never received another message. But for months, I lived in a constant state of paranoia, convinced that he would find out where I lived and pick up exactly where he left off. Every knock at my door made me nervous that this was the moment that I'd open it and see him. And although he never did show up at my door, that fear lingered on long after he disappeared. Who would have thought that a single swipe could completely derail my life like this? They say trust your instincts, and now I know why. Nate wasn't just awkward, shy, and nervous. He might have been those things, but he was also dangerous, I believe. And I was lucky to escape with nothing more than the memory of his haunting smile and weird energy. It started with a box of cereal. I was in the grocery store trying to decide between Frosted Flakes and some off-brand version when she appeared in my peripheral. We happened to glance at each other at the same time and smile. Mine a nervous one, but hers genuine and warm. And her smile made me forget about what I was doing. Go with the real deal, she said, tapping the box of Frosted Flakes. Life is too short. I laughed, a little caught off guard, and nodded in agreement. She grabbed a box for herself, and then I decided to strike up a conversation, hoping that I would get her number in the end. It turned out that we both lived nearby, which wasn't all that shocking considering we were grocery shopping at the same supermarket. We both loved horror movies and hated the way pumpkin spice took over everything in the fall. By the time we made it to the checkout line, I'd accomplished the goal and I had gotten her number. That night we texted, and the next evening we were sitting across from one another in a dimly lit restaurant. The conversation flowed easily, and at first it was light and playful, but there were comments made throughout the night that made me raise a brow, like our exes had all wronged her, but she made sure they had regretted it. I laughed nervously, hoping she was joking, but her eyes and the fact that she didn't even crack a smile told me that she wasn't. She also had this strange, obnoxious laugh that was slightly unnerving. When the check came, I reached for my wallet, but she grabbed my hand and offered to cover the tab, saying I now owe her another eyebrow raiser. After leaving the restaurant, she suggested that we take a walk, and I was ready to get home. I'd had enough of this date and enough of her. I forced a stretch and a yawn and told her that it was lovely meeting her and that I had enjoyed our evening, but needed to get up early in the morning for a meeting at work. And she looked disappointed, but we said our farewells, and I expected us to go our separate ways at that point. But before she let me go, she asked for a picture of us together. I thought it was a bit weird, but I consented to the selfie and proceeded to walk toward my car, noticing that she was walking right behind me. Turns out we had parked in the same parking lot, and the walk to it was awkward, to say the least. Neither of us said a word, and the silence was deafening. When I looked into the rear view mirror about 10 minutes or so into my drive, and noticed her car behind me and her eyes staring back at me in the reflection, my spidey senses tingled. Then I remembered that we did, in fact, live on the same side of town. But calling that did not give me any kind of reassurance or comfort. I still felt very uneasy, and I still kept checking the rearview mirror, and each time my eyes met hers, and it looked as if she was staring directly through my soul. The last 7 minutes or so of my drive, with her still behind me, I contemplated pulling up somewhere else other than my home, just in case she was in fact following me, but I was relieved when I looked up to see that she was no longer there. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a while in my car, replaying the entire evening in my head. Her laugh, those comments she made, and the way her eyes pierced through me in the rearview mirror. You're just being paranoid, I tried to tell myself, and take a deep breath before going inside. I kick off my shoes, grab myself a cold beer, and as soon as I lay across my couch, my phone buzzes, and it's her. Had a great time tonight. Hope you made it home safe. With a wink and smiley face. I stared at the screen, not sure how to respond, and after a minute or so, I settled on thanks, you too, which I felt was short, polite, and wasn't necessarily leading her on. The following morning, I'm at work when I'm notified by the receptionist that there is someone at the front desk asking for me. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I had no idea who it could be, but when I got to the front desk, my heart sank. It was her, smiling and holding a bag as if this was normal. Hi, she said with a glee. I was in the area and I thought I'd drop you off some lunch. I remember you said you worked here and had a bunch of meetings today. I figured I'd save you some time by bringing you food. Thanks, I said, taking the bag hesitantly, and she smiled even bigger. Not a problem. I won't keep you. See you later. And before I could say anything more, she was out of the door. For the rest of the day, she texted me almost every hour. Hope your day is going well. Thinking of you. Random links to TikTok videos and memes. And at first, I was responding sporadically, being short, hoping that she would take the hint. But obviously, she was not. And even after I stopped responding, the messages just kept flooding in. That evening, when I finally got home from work, there was a small package on my doorstep, and I grabbed it on my way in, assuming that it was something that I had ordered online. But inside of the box was a framed photo of the picture we had taken on our date. And on the back of it was the date of our date and a heart. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number, and she cheerfully answered on the second ring. I cut her off mid-hello and asked, "How do you know where I live?" By now I was done walking on eggshells because this was creepy. There was a pause, and her response made me even angrier. "Oh, you mentioned your street the other night, and I just guessed." She was lying. I had not mentioned my street. Furious, I told her that this was weird. She was weird, and not to ever contact me again. By now, I was out of grace, and I don't feel like she deserved that. She didn't say anything, and after a few moments of silence, I hung up and I blocked her number. The next morning, I arrived to work, and at the receptionist's desk, there was coffee and a note that had been left there for me. "Life's too short, let's talk." And it was from her. At that point, I decided to call the police, which I felt kind of silly doing, being a man and all, and even more so when they didn't really seem to take my concerns seriously and claimed that there was nothing they could really do as she has not broken any laws. I'm sure she knew that. And in the following days, I saw her several times and it felt like I was seeing her everywhere. At my favorite coffee shop, outside of my gym, sitting in her car, and in the grocery store where it all started. She never said anything. She just stood at a distance and stared eerily. I tried to ignore her, act like I didn't see her, and I guess it worked, or at least I hope so, because it's been about 4 months since I'd seen her anywhere, but I'm still not completely confident that she's not still out there lurking. And I feel guilty about feeling this way, but a part of me hopes that she has sank her claws into new prey. Anyway, several months later, I received an invitation in the mail from a cousin of mine who has gotten engaged recently and wanted all of us to come together to celebrate. I had not yet met his now fiance, but I did know that my aunt did not like her and felt like the two of them had moved entirely too fast. My heart sank when I entered the venue and I saw that she was his fiance. Indeed, she had done just that. All right, so story number 1. If you guessed that this was a false story, a matter of fiction, you would be wrong. Unfortunately, this is a true story. This happened between 23-year-old Katie Locke and 26-year-old Carl Langdale. The only detail that I changed is the dating app. They actually met on Plenty of Fish and not Hinge. And when Carl confessed to his mother, he told her, quote, "Don't cry over me. I'm a monster and a psychopath." Here is a bit of his interrogation video.
Mum says that you told her I've killed her, Mum. Is that true? Can you imagine her reaction? And she questions that and you say, "No, Mum, honestly, I've killed her. I'm a monster." Is that what you believe? You're a monster? Why do you think that? What's going on in your head? What makes you think you're a monster?
This happened in 2015 and he was actually sent to a prison dubbed Monster Mansion because it houses the most brutal of criminals like himself. And on February 11th, 2021, about 6 years or so into his sentence, the staff found him slumped over in his cell with his throat cut. He was in the cell by himself. And so the prison basically just wrote it off as him having done it to himself. Which, of course, his mama didn't believe that. She thought the staff had something to do with it. But girl, who cares? Now, story number 2. This is actually another true story. It happened to a young woman over in the UK who was 21 at the time. Originally, her name was Melissa, and of course, her new one is not public business. But below, in the description box, I will link the article that I got my information from if you care to read more into it. She did say that the experience has never left her. Even after she graduated that school, no matter what she did, she never felt comfortable on campus. She also did say that she regrets not listening to her gut, that feeling that she got when she first walked into that cafe and saw him. So all of y'all out there ignoring y'all's gut feeling, you gotta stop. And finally, story number 3. Now, don't get too cute thinking, oh, because the first 2 were true, the third one has to be false. That is not always the case, honey. That will not be the case. Now, if you guessed that this one was based on a true event, not this particular series of events. This one I did make up, but there are some women out there that are stalkers and crazy, so y'all be careful on those dating sites. Everybody be careful everywhere, okay? That is it for this video. Please in the comments let me know how well you did. I appreciate you so much for giving this content a chance. I love it. I love creating it. The little girl in me that used to play The Sims, baby, just enjoys this so much. And that is all I have for you this week. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Happy New Year, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.